It's no secret that decaf has been the butt of many jokes in the coffee world. It's hated so much that it even has its own slogan. Now, as far as I can tell, this phrase is a modified version of the samurai phrase, death before dishonor, which comes from the Bushido and refers to the act of seppuku, which, if you ask me, seems like a reasonable response if someone asks you to drink a cup of coffee. But in order to find out if these hardcore coffee folks were right about decaf, I decided to sit down with a scientist and get real nerdy with it. So I decided to call up Dr. Michael W. Crowder, who has a PhD in chemistry, to talk about how removing caffeine impacts the flavor of coffee. I actually found Michael through a really great article that he wrote about this topic, so if you're curious, go check that out as well. I read your piece about decaf. I would love to chat with you a little bit about your sort of expertise on the chemical process of decaf.
So I will tell you that when I was asked to write this article, I tell you, I did not know a lot about the process. And I actually read everything I could get my hands on. Quite honestly, most of the things on the internet are done by coffee companies. I could find very few papers, scientific papers on coffee, what are the chemicals in both green and roasted coffee, which I found shocking that research had not been done. This is the #1 beverage in the world. I suspect it has been done, but it's been done by the large coffee companies and it's trade secrets. And they don't want to share that information because it gives them maybe a competitive advantage. So I was fascinated by the entire process. And the more I read about this, it is such a nice chemistry thing to start looking at. It's just that it hasn't been done, at least for the public viewing. The removal of the caffeine in beans, though, I will tell you, I was perplexed the entire time because it made no sense to me how that actually works. And almost all the websites talked about that the process removes caffeine and caffeine only. Mm-hmm. And I knew as a chemist that's impossible to do that. I'll just give you a couple of examples of things that I don't know that's not in the literature. So if you were to take a green coffee bean and extract as many chemicals out of that bean as you could and analyze what they are, and then take a roasted bean and do the same thing and find out what are the chemicals in that roasted bean and how the chemicals change when you went from the chemicals in a green bean to a roasted bean, I would have thought that literature is there. And I couldn't find it if it is.
Really?
I'm pretty certain that what goes on when you roast are Maillard reactions, but there's just tons of Maillard reactions that are possible. And the reactions that occur in a bean that's been decaffeinated versus one that was left as it is, there's going to be differences in the starting chemicals, which means there'll be differences in the resulting Maillard reaction products that you would make during roasting. All of those things could potentially affect flavor and the smell and certainly the chemical makeup.
I guess what I don't quite understand is why we have processes that remove, 94 to 98% of that caffeine, but we can't seem to get all of it out. Is it like the, 0.1% of germs that we can't seem to kill with all of our cleaning products? Or
the entire process, actually most chemical processes are what's called an equilibrium process. And so what happens in the decaffeination process is that you take green coffee beans that have, and I'm just going to make up a number, 100 grams of caffeine. They probably don't have that much. And then you take those beans and put them into a liquid that has 0 grams of caffeine. Well, what equilibrium does is it says that the chemical will move to where it's trying to make them equal on both sides of the skin of the cell itself. So in the first round of trying to decaffeinate, let's say that you have 0 in the water outside of the cell or the liquid outside of this coffee bean, and you have 100 grams inside. At equilibrium, it would be roughly 50 grams on each side. So what happens is then you remove that liquid and put another liquid that has 0. And now you have 50 inside the bean, 0 on the outside. Equilibrium wants it to move from 25 to 25 again. You remove that liquid, and you keep doing that until you get to a point where you can't go below the number, because there's always going to be a slight imbalance. Most of them can get to 95% or greater removal of the caffeine. There's one other complicating factor, is that caffeine isn't always just sitting by itself. It's formed temporary bonds with other chemicals that are close by. The caffeine might be held a little bit tighter then, and you can't remove all of it. I tell you, I think it's amazing that they can remove 95 to 100 to 98% of it. That's a pretty amazing feat in itself. Many of the coffee websites say that they remove caffeine and caffeine only, and that can't be true. The little process that I told you about with equilibrium, any molecule that is soluble in that liquid on the outside technically is going to do the same thing that caffeine did. So there's caffeine in there, and there's a whole bunch of other chemicals that are close to the same solubility in the liquid that you extract it into. So all of those chemicals are moving out too.
Yeah.
Now, the way that companies have tried to reduce the loss of those chemicals is that very often they'll take all of the liquids that you kept pulling out of the bean, and they will try to specifically bind caffeine, and then they'll rehydrate the beans with ones that have the other chemicals in it. And so you're setting up then an equilibrium where the stuff in the liquid goes back into the bean again.
So we have this caffeine liquid with all of these sort of, maybe we can think of them as like flavors, right?
Could be.
And we want to remove the caffeine from that liquid and then add that back in
That's
to
correct.
our coffee. Yeah.
That's correct. One thing I would say about those chemicals that came out initially with the caffeine, I would say that many of them are probably chemicals that don't have flavor, but when you do your roasting process, they are converted through the Maillard process in Maillard reactions into flavor compounds. Chemistry gets really, really complicated very quickly. Boy, I'm telling you, I've read so much on this, and it's just mind-boggling. But if you smell one chemical, it opens up pathways to you be able to smell other chemicals at lower amounts. And think about that, how that could change things tremendously too with your coffee and the flavor profiles that you're after.
So if I smell an orange, I would maybe be able to better smell chocolate. But
Maybe.
if that orange isn't there, I might not be able to smell the chocolate in the same way.
Absolutely right. And you think about the hundreds, maybe even thousands of chemicals in coffee, that interplay is happening too. It's a very, very complicated problem then to be able to figure this out.
My last question for you, why do you think that decaf gets such a bad rep?
Well, I think part of it is that the purists, and I have to admit that I'm one of them, I love the caffeine in coffee. I don't get the headaches. It wakes me up. It makes me more alert. It almost like if you don't have it in the day, you kind of missed it. You know, that early morning coffee, it's so good. And I think part of it is that many people believe that they can taste a big difference in a decaf versus a caffeinated. And given what we talked about, that is possible. It's very possible that's true. To me, I think it's fine if decaf is the way that you can enjoy your coffee, that's the way you ought to enjoy your coffee.
Now, talking with Michael actually got me in the mood to do a bit of an experiment on my own. So I invited a bunch of friends over to see if they could tell the difference between regular coffee and decaf coffee in a blind taste test. For my experiment, we had 4 coffees, 2 of which were decaf and 2 of which were regular. Do you think this is gonna be easy or hard?
I would say probably pretty easy.
I think it'll be hard for me to tell the difference.
I think it'll be hard.
I think this is gonna be pretty easy.
I think it'll be a little difficult for me.
I don't think I'd be able to really tell.
Very hard.
Okay.
I don't know that I'm gonna be able to figure it out.
Do you think this is gonna be easy or hard? After everyone had tasted the coffees, we tallied up the results and found that literally no one could tell the difference between regular coffee and the decaf coffee. Well, kind of. One person actually guessed them all right, but he actually showed up late and didn't even try all the coffees, so he just guessed on them and managed to get them all right. And look, there's absolutely a version of this experiment where people were able to guess the decaf coffees right every single time, because let's face it, most decaf coffee is kind of ass, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, a decaf coffee actually won the US Brewers competition last year for the first time ever, which if you don't know is just a competition where a bunch of coffee nerds get together and compete for the title of US Coffee Roasting Champion. And this is starting to change the perception of decaf amongst even the most hardcore in the coffee scene. And not only that, decaf coffee seems to be growing amongst the casual coffee audience as well, which to me feels like the growth of mocktails and healthy sodas. We all still want our treats, but maybe a more mellow version of them. So does decaf deserve all of the hate that it gets? Honestly, nah, dude, it's great. It's delicious. As someone who used to be pretty skeptical of most decaf coffees, I can tell you that decaf has come a long way, and especially if you try decaf coffee from a specialty coffee roaster, you're gonna probably get something pretty tasty. I think it's a great alternative to coffee, especially for those who are caffeine sensitive, or just want to drink coffee throughout the day. Death before decaf, more like regular coffee before decaf most of the time, unless it's after like noon and I have to be up early and I need to sleep, so I'm gonna drink a decaf because I still want a little treat in my day. So don't hate on decaf. I've got 2 really delicious coffees that are decaf if you want to try them, and next time you're in a coffee shop, give the decaf a try if you're curious. All right, that's pretty much it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you Monday.